Welcome back to Cycling Unboxed. I am here in Tadley at a shop called Pedalon, and they have let me walk around and analyse the new Giant Propel here. So if you're looking for a new Giant Propel, highly recommend checking them out. But the keen-eyed of you might have spotted that I have this red bike behind me. This is the previous generation Giant Propel. So I can compare the tube and frame shapes directly from the new version to the old one. And there are quite a few differences in there. You know, they look very similar side silhouette and stuff, but yeah, they actually are different frame shapes. But first of all, here are some stats that come from Giants themselves. Kicking it off, here is the big claim. At 40 kilometers an hour, they are stating that they are saving 18.8 watts, I believe the number is. Now, that is a very, very large claim, and I think you're gonna have to take everything in the system to account for that. I believe a lot of that is because of the narrower handlebars as well. That adds a lot, so a lot of that number is coming from your position. But when we get into the tube shapes and things like that, you'll probably be able to see where they've made those savings and those changes. Now, the next thing that they've managed to do is save 350 grams over the whole system. So I think like 77 grams of that comes from the actual frame itself, which is a fairly decent saving. You know, part of that's going to be the handlebars, part of that's going to be the seat post, part of that is going to be the wheel system as well. These are the SLR wheels from them. So it all kind of adds up to a 350 gram saving. That's not the frame itself, it's the whole system that they've managed to save that from. Yeah, a big chunk of that is the wheels and tires. Like I said, these are their SLR wheels paired with the Cadex Aero tyres. I'll show them in a moment. And you can see they've got carbon spokes as well, which should make it very, very slightly more aerodynamic. I tell you what, these are very thin. We're going to get into that in a moment as well, but yeah. Big chunk of that saving is from the wheels. Next up on the stats is a 25% increase in vertical compliance. So more comfort on the rear end basically. And that comes from this drop seat stay. So I'll give you a little hint. Like I said, we're going to go over the differences in a moment. But yeah, apparently 25% more vertical compliance, which here in roads in the United Kingdom, very important. With the side-to-side comparison, one thing to state at first, the old version is a medium large and the new version is a large. So one frame size bigger, you'll still be able to see the differences in frame to frame. So yeah, the first thing we've got to point out is the Contact SLR Aero handlebar. Just a one-piece Aero handlebar normally kind of saves 4 watts over a 2-piece system is the general kind of number, because it's the first thing that's hitting the air. Obviously there's going to be different bike to bike. That's just a general average. And it does actually come with this nice computer mount out the front. And it's got like it's almost like a spoon shape, because I guess it wants to make the actual head unit itself slightly more aerodynamic and integrated itself in there. And yeah, it's a nice looking handlebar. And where they're getting those big saving claims from, basically, the bikes come stocked with narrower handlebars than normal. Say, for example, on a 56, it would normally come with a 42 wide handlebar. Well, now it's going to come stocked with a 40 mil wide or 400 millimeter wide handlebar. So just going slightly narrower. Of course, at the shop here in Pedalon, if you wanted to go even narrower or whatever, or change the widths, they would do that for you here when you buy the bike. Now, getting onto the top tube, these are going to be some tough bits to show, but this top tube here, I'm going to say is slightly more angular than the previous generation. There's more of a sharper shoulder on the top here and on the side edge, whereas this previous version has almost a flatter top and then more of a D shape underneath the bottom of it. Not only that, this rear end right here, I mean, it's unbelievably skinny. One of the skinniest top tubes I've ever seen on a bike. You can see that's my finger there. And even though the previous generation is skinny, it's not quite as skinny as the new version here. I would say they've also made the bolt cover a little bit more sleeker as well. You can see that it looks just a little bit bigger, a little bit more cumbersome on the previous version. But yeah, it looks a little bit nicer and sleeker on this one. Next up, which I think is going to be the main difference between these two bikes, is the head tube area here. Once again, first thing hitting the wind, so it needs to be one of the most aerodynamic things on the bike. And you can see that, wow, it's a very, very skinny head tube and it has a very, very sharp nose on there. Really angled, pointy front to the front of this bike here. And while I quite like it, it's quite like an aggressive look. If we come to the previous version here, you can see that it's much more rounded. It still has a slightly sharp nose, which is quite hard to pick up on camera, but yeah, no way near as pointy as this thing right there. Next up, they've reduced the overall skinniness of the head tube. So, you know, less area, less stuff to hit the wind. So it is narrower, especially through that midsection there. They've managed to get that frontal area down. And not just through the center of it, you'll notice that on the sides here, this section is pretty much flat on the new Propel here, whereas if you look at the old version, they have, once again, like this kind of shoulder that sits here. Once again, very hard to pick up on camera, but it does decrease the area, as there's just more material sticking out here. Then if we start moving down to the fork, again, similar story, we get this sharper top area. Probably quite hard to see on camera, but this section is definitely more rounded. It looks a little bit older now because it's so rounded, but yeah, a little bit sharper up top there. Then we get to the depths of the fork. Isn't too much difference between them. They're very, very similar on the forks. But one thing I will say, again, the frontal area, the sharpness of the front edge of the new version is definitely sharper than the front edge of the previous version here. The previous version looks more rounded, this looks more blade-like. Let's get to the down tubes next, and while one of the things that, well, I'm really struggling to spot the differences between the two, I think they've kept the general shape. The main difference I can see is this top-down view. Like, yeah, this section here is just wider than this section here. But other than that, you're pretty much standard D-shape down tube, really. And that brings us on to the next thing that you can definitely tell that's different here. And they have new bottle cages, and well, so many bikes are coming out with these nowadays. The ones that come to mind are Seeker Spear, Factor Ostro. Basically, they just kind of integrate the bottle cages a little bit more with the frame. I guess it adds a little bit more depth and just makes the bottle itself slightly more aerodynamic. Now, I know there's an actual rule. If you have like an aero bottle cage like this, they have to come stock with the bike, basically. I think it's part of the UCI regulations. So yeah, they feel quite nice. They feel pretty sturdy, these ones. Seat post, I'm literally just gonna brush over. It looks like the exact same width to me, the exact same depth. I mean, it looks like, well, the exact same seat post, which actually isn't a bad thing because it means there's more compatibility between forward and backwards of the bike. One thing that I did miss that the guys at the shop have just pointed out to me is if we look at the old version here, you can see that the top of the seat post there, well, it's fairly plain and simple. And if we look at the new version, it basically just has like this little lift to it. It's like aero kind of quiff at the back of it. So just a very subtle difference in the detail. But yeah, the new seat posts will be very slightly more aero because of that than the previous version, but they are the exact same shape, the guys at the shop have just told me. So, you know, they are backward compatible. But one thing we really can tell the difference is the seat stays. Big changes here. You can see on the previous version here, they've got this kind of general old version Giant where they've almost like stuck the two seat stays together at the top. And you can see up here, they're just now a separate gap in there. I can imagine they found a way to add additional stiffness to this area without adding like the extra material like they have here. I also guess on this previous version it adds this extra material behind the seat stay here, which hides it from aerodynamically, but yeah, it seems to not be an issue here. But again, if we compare the two, I know this is a slightly larger bike, but you can see just how much lower these seat stays have been dropped. They've been dropped dramatically. I mean, you're talking 4 or 5 centimeters there. It's quite a big drop. So yeah, apparently that adds to 25% more compliance basically in this section. Like I said, big claim, but maybe it's true. You'd have to test it and see it. Ooh, another thing that I feel like I've just spotted by being down at this angle, I think this is going to add to the compliance, and this is a really, really hard thing to see. I don't know if it's going to be able to see on camera, but the whole seat stay isn't straight down like this. Basically, it comes forwards, has a little kink, and then goes down this way. Basically, this top section seems to be a little bit steeper, which I think will add a little bit more flex, adding to that compliance. And I guess you get that by dropping the chainstay and allowing that rear to flex. But yeah, you almost can't see it on camera, but it's not a straight line. It comes this angle, then slightly less steep down. Not bad there, Giant. Good design. Well, this one nearly skipped me. We now have a new UDH compatible universal derailleur hanger for the rear chainstay here. Now, of course, that's to increase the compatibility with SRAM group sets, and you never know, we'll see this year if Shimano go in the direction of this as well. Next thing, whilst we're down here at the back end, we have now got 32 millimeters of tyre clearance versus 30 millimeters on the previous generation, and that's 32 millimeters measured at the tire. So basically it'll give you 4 mil of clearance either side when you've got a 32 mil wide tire on there. So yeah, an extra 2 millimeters, not ultra wide, but you know, better than it used to be. When you get the two next to each other, like the new one just like looks like it's more refined. The previous version kind of looks like a prototype now. Like this is what the Giant Propel kind of always should have been. Just that visual sharpness, that extra addition to it. Yeah, I think they've just really refined the crispness of the bike overall. So yeah, let's get onto the wheels. These are the new SLR Zero wheels, the kind of top spec of Giant's kind of own wheels. Now, someone correct me if I'm wrong, I've been struggling to find on their website, but it looks like it's probably been made with Cadex, because Cadex still sell their top brand wheels, and they are spec'd with Cadex tires here. They are hookless, these wheels, making that what you will. Not personally a hookless guy, I would like at least like a mini hook, but Giant are a big enough brand where I'll probably trust them to make wheels this good and have those tolerances done right, so you don't get the bead of the tire coming off the wheel. And yeah, the spec to these new Cadex Aero tires, which are a little bit lighter, and these are 28C, so 28 mil wide, these ones. They actually look quite skinny nowadays. And you can see they've got these like aero trips for, well, more aerodynamics. I don't know what the rolling resistance of these are yet. I have to have a look at that. But as you can see, on a 28 mil tire with a 22.4 internal, you can see that the width of the outside of the rim is still a lot wider than the inside. So yeah, you could definitely got some room to play in terms of tire width there. But I imagine aerodynamically this 28 is probably optimized for this bike and this wheel setup. Well, these new versions do come with carbon spokes as well, obviously saving a lot of weight. They're very deep and very wide, these ones. I don't know if they'll catch the air a little bit, but one thing I will say is that they are very narrow. So they've got like a very sharp edge to the leading and trail edge of these. So yeah, very deep, but very, very skinny, which I'd imagine will be good aerodynamically. One thing I have to apologize for is I forgot to bring my scales. That one's on me, sorry guys. Can't weigh this one in. Well guys, there are the major differences between the two bikes there. You know, bit more aero, bit more weight saving basically, slightly more compliant, the usual stuff. But I hope that in this video you can visually see the differences that they have made between the previous and the new generation here. If you have any questions or things that you think I have missed, of course stick them in the comments down below. I reply to most things, or you can follow my shenanigans up here on Instagram, where I post quite frequently. Other than that, I've been Jason, this has been Cycling Unboxed. I'll see you in another video.